Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar called Reallocating Road Space. That's Emergency, Experimental and Strategic Planning. We had over 250 sign-ups for the session. I think it's testament to the importance of this topic for planning healthy developments in the future. So I've brought the event together today as part of Cities Week. It's a collaboration between the RTPI Northwest and East of England branches. My name is Ian Pennington. I'm a planner at Wardell Armstrong, and among my voluntary pursuits, I sit on the RTPI Northwest Regional Activities Committee, which is how I've arrived here today. So the topic, reallocating road space. The theme came about following the launch of the so-called Cyclops Junction in Hume, just outside Manchester city centre. We'll hear today about this from Dominic Smith, who is the Senior Transport Strategy Officer at Transport for Greater Manchester, TFGM. Dom leads TFGM's cycling and walking infrastructure delivery team that's responsible for delivering the B network, walking and cycling network across the region. The Cyclops arrived shortly after the Dutch-style roundabout was opened on Fendon Road in Cambridge. We'll hear about that, among other schemes, from Vanessa Kelly, who has been on the Cambridgeshire County Council cycling projects team since 2013. Another strategic project that we'll look at today is the Chisholm Trail, also in Cambridgeshire and primarily off-road as I understand it. So it gives us a different type of network solution compared with the other two. Patrick Joyce will tell us about that. Patrick is an agricultural engineer who has spent the last 18 years working on Cambridgeshire highways projects relating to cycling. These were all infrastructure projects long in the making and examples of innovations that can really help to realign our movement hierarchy. But this year has also seen emergency changes necessitated by the pandemic, and that's where our title for this webinar comes from, as I'm sure you'll have recognised. The government's instruction was, and I quote, swift and meaningful plans to reallocate road space to cyclists and pedestrians, including on strategic corridors. Our speakers will also aim to touch on the experimental traffic orders that have been used to undergo concurrent consultation for trials of low traffic neighbourhoods. All of which, I think you'll agree, is very exciting for active travel and healthy streets. We're going to try and cram as much as we can into the next hour. But first, even more excitingly, we have a little bit of housekeeping. As attendees, you've all been muted. If you have a question for the organisers or speakers, then please send that through via the question box in the Go-To webinar panel, which is either on the right or top of your screen, I believe. The speakers' presentations will be about 15 minutes each before we come to the Q&A at the end. Then for the Q&A, co-organiser Graham Bloomfield and I will pick a few questions from those submitted. And any questions not answered will be considered after the session and the answers emailed to all participants. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the RTPI YouTube channel after the event. If you personally lose connection to the session, then please try to rejoin via the link emailed to you from Go-To webinar. You may want to disconnect all other devices from your Wi-Fi if your Wi-Fi is struggling. If the speakers lose connectivity, then please wait in the webinar and keep an eye on your emails in case we have to relaunch the session. So with the scene set and everything ticked off, let's go to our first speaker, who will be Vanessa Kelly from Cambridgeshire County Council.
Okay, hello everybody. Well, let me just sort out my screen. It's not happening. Let me just, sorry, be with you in a moment. Right, are we ready to go? Is everything okay?
Yeah, good to go.
Great, okay. Hi, everybody. There's the roundabout, Hendon Road roundabout from the air. And oh, I don't seem to be able to. Yeah, mine doesn't seem to be working. Sorry. I just thought. Sorry, the slideshow doesn't seem to be working for me. I don't know why it isn't working.
If you just come out of your presentation, Vanessa, and click back into it, it might help you click through.
Okay. Sorry about this. Eating away into the time of the thing. Okay, let me just turn that off for a second. I don't seem to be able to get out of it now. So basically everything's frozen for me. Okay. Okay, I seem to have got on to the next. I think I'm having problems with my laptop freezing, which is to be expected since it's a bit of council rubbish. I'll try and get going now, okay? Hopefully it'll ease up now. I wanted to give you a bit of background to the infrastructure we've been delivering in Cambridge. So in 2013, the cycling projects team received Cycle City Ambition funding, got 2 tranches of it. The funding was conditional on delivering high quality cycling infrastructure and monitoring the schemes before and after. And then in 2015, working for the Greater Cambridge Partnership, we received further funding to improve key commuter routes. You can see examples of this on the screen at the moment. So cycle priority over side roads, and also separating cyclists from the carriageway, either fully where there was the width to do so, which we had on Green End Road on the right there, or by height when widths were constrained and we raised the cycle lane. Okay, it's working now, good. So we saw this new funding as an opportunity to be innovative, and the team leader, Grant Weller, and I came up with new designs for curbs. So we used these on Huntingdon Road initially. You can see the Cambridge curb on the left there, which is a sort of sloping curb that cyclists can leave and enter the cycle lane when they want to. And that's an example of it there on the right on Huntingdon Road. We also designed sort of floating bus stops. So the cycle lane is narrowed and ramped through the bus stop over the crossing point, and the bus shelter is cantilevered with no side panels. So if you're a bus passenger getting off the bus, you've got good visibility of the cycle lane. Advanced cycle green signals were something that came pretty early to Cambridge. We've got them at a number of junctions. And we also introduced side-by-side cycle symbols. So it indicates to cyclists when it's safe to overtake, but also you can ride side-by-side because cycling should be a sociable activity. And then parallel crossings, we were really keen to introduce these, and we were so keen, in fact, that the one on Huntingdon Road was built within a month of them becoming legal in 2016. They're a useful option at a busy junction on a cyclist desire line. They're not yet in the highway code, but the giveaway lines and the zebrite beleishas, which are extra bright, do indicate to drivers that this crossing is a bit different. And from monitoring, we've seen that compliance at at these parallel crossings is pretty good within the city. And in 2014, the Cycling Projects team delivered a sort of Dutch light sort of roundabout. So it's got the same deflection for drivers as they go around the roundabout. You've really got to slow down, narrow carriageway. But instead of having sort of proper crossings, there are uncontrolled crossing points from shared use paths. So that's not as the Dutch would do it. But as we've seen, this design has certainly reduced accidents quite a bit. So all in all, we feel that the changes that we've brought about in Cambridge in recent years, the reallocation of road space, for example, on Hills Road, one of the big sort of arterial routes in and out of the city, you've now got 3-metre wide traffic lanes and 2.3-metre wide cycle lanes. So drivers have got to sort of adjust to a different streetscape, one where they have to be more cautious because they don't have a nice wide road to drive along. And it was all these things sort of building up that made us think, well, maybe now is the time for a Dutch style roundabout. So, oh look, it's frozen again. Oh, good. Good. Really sorry about this, people. Come on. Ah, okay. Some miracle that happened. So, so looking at Queen Edith's Way on the map, I've outlined it in blue, the full length of Queen Edith's Way. So it's a sort of residential road in the south of Cambridge, very near Addenbrooke's and the biomedical campus, which I've got there. And also at the other end of it, you've got the UK headquarters for ARM. The Fendon Road roundabout itself, I've outlined in green. I hope you can see that. And the poor provision for pedestrians and cyclists along this road has been a long-standing issue. And so local councillors secured some S106 funding to be allocated to improve the infrastructure along there. And it's stuck again. Okay. Right. Okay. One of the things that we did in preparation for delivering new infrastructure was a school survey, which I think indicates the high level of cycling that you've got amongst school kids in the city. So 56, almost 57% of kids at Netherhall, which is on Queen Edith's Way, cycle to school, amongst other means. The biomedical campus in Addenbrooke's, you've got 35% of staff cycling to work, which is the same as the rate by car. And then you've got staff at ARM at 28%. So the first of the public consultations we did in 2015 was mainly trying to understand what the issues were. And as you can see there, the Queen Edith's Way Fendon Road roundabout was the sort of biggest safety concern. So the old roundabout design was a barrier to growing cycling along this route and in the area. We certainly know it was a barrier from monitoring we've done. And the traffic speeds from the roundabout design, the old roundabout design, and the lack of pedestrian and cycle crossings, which you can see the lack of on the right there, is probably the main reason for it being perceived as unsafe. So the following year, we had a sort of bigger public consultation with actual proposals. These proposals came out of a stakeholder workshop we'd held in March. And we then proposed the options over the summer. So this is a bit more of a close-up of the consultation drawing. You can see that it's got deflection around the central island, narrow lanes, and an orbital cycle lane. But the cyclists approach each of the crossings at a bit of an angle rather than straight on. So that means they don't have such good visibility of oncoming vehicles. And also on Fendon Road and Mowbray Road, the north and south arms, There's no provision for cyclists exiting, and you don't have islands in the middle of the road either. So all in all, we got pretty good support for the Dutch style roundabout, with 433 respondents strongly supporting or supporting, as opposed to 115 opposed or strongly opposed. We received approval to move to the detailed design stage and construct the roundabout in November 2016. We've still got some work to do on the rest of Queen Edith's Way. But not long after we got the approval, we were contacted by the Dutch consultancy firm Royal Haskoning. They offered to do the preliminary designs for free in return for some publicity. And it was certainly one of the best decisions we ever made, because we could really draw on a high level of expertise where the design was concerned. So you can see the changes that they brought about to the design. The cyclists are now approaching each arm straight on. There's greater deflection for vehicles around the central island. There are central islands on Fendon Road and Mowbray. And also on the eastern arm, you can see that they've separated the cycle crossing from the zebra crossing, because there's a private driveway, there's an access between there. So we then moved towards the detailed design, close up of that. And this was refined further by Skanska. And the Department for Transport accepted that we needed to separate the crossing from the cycle crossing on that eastern arm, so that was good. They didn't let us have giveaway triangles on every arm apart from that separate one. And we've now introduced mini zebras over the cycle lanes, which was something residents and local councillors certainly wanted us to do. When it came to signage, we felt that the signage that we'd had on the parallel crossing on Huntingdon Road was a bit underwhelming. It's legal, but doesn't really stand out. We wanted signage which packed a punch and left drivers in no doubt as to what they were expected to do at this brand new roundabout. We came up with the signage on the right. It took the DFT a long time to come back to us and tell us that basically we couldn't have it. The message shouldn't have been cyclists and pedestrians have priority. It should have been give way to pedestrians and cyclists. And even this was unnecessary, because that apparently is what parallel crossings mean, even if drivers aren't actually aware of it. They also didn't like the red colour of the cycle lane on the sign, because they associated it with sort of prohibition regulatory signs. You'll see that little example of no pedestrians on the left there. So for the moment, we've got these signs. So in order, new road layout, then the pedestrian and cycle crossing, and hidden in that photograph is the give way to cyclists and pedestrians signage, but it just doesn't really do the job we want it to do. So it's back to the drawing board on that one for us. So works began on the construction in September 2019. The works were carried out in quarters, as you can see there, and the west arm of Queen Edith's Way was closed, and then we had 2- or 3-way lights on the other arms. A lot of construction issues. You can see in that photo what we had to face. We weren't allowed to cut those roots because they belonged to a tree growing in a private garden. There was a proper spaghetti junction of pipes and cables under the roundabout. There's even a military cable which we weren't allowed to know the location of. And a lot of this became obvious once we opened the road up. You know, the trial holes just didn't show the extent of the rerouting and diverting that would be needed. In the end, we installed 700 meters of new ducting, and we removed another 200 meters of ducting. Our contractors worked collaboratively with the utility companies on site, but this did impact on the program and the budget. And of course, that first lockdown in the spring, when our contractors did not work for 6 weeks, also obviously affected both the program and the budget. But But once the utility works were completed, the pace picked up. You can see tactile paving being laid here. And then in late spring, the roundabout was really starting to take shape. You can see the mini zebras there. And then this is the eastern arm with the sort of separate zebra and cycle crossing. We used a special sort of French gully, which you can see on the right there, which is cycle friendly, good for a constrained location, and should prevent flooding and other issues on the cycle lanes. We reduced the speed limit on the approaches to the roundabout to send a signal to drivers, but unfortunately it was a signal that the night before the official opening, a driver must have missed because he did a hit and run on one of the Belisha beacons. So we felt it was really important as we approached the opening of the roundabout to get the message out about how different it was. We produced a video, a safety video that showed how to use the roundabout as a cyclist, a pedestrian and a driver. And the main message was slow down and look out for each other. And in the case of drivers, give way. The video was sent out to everyone we could think of, really, and it was certainly picked up by the local and the national media. It has been a really difficult scheme to deliver. There was a lot of opposition from a small number of local residents, and their main argument was that evidence from Holland showed that there were more accidents at these roundabouts where cyclists had priority than at those where they didn't. The Dutch acknowledge this, but they argue in favour of cyclist priority because it enables mobility and therefore encourages cycling. And this sort of roundabout design is also much safer than a signalised junction, which does feel counterintuitive, but the Dutch have been replacing signalised junctions with these roundabouts for many years now. So yeah, you can see the official opening there with the councillors, and at the back, the tall guy I invited from the Dutch embassy because it felt like the right thing to do. And we also popped up on the One show about 6 weeks later. And that's me on the opening day, having a bit of a laugh in orange in acknowledgement of our Dutch inspiration. Okay, so that's me done. Thank you. Thank you for being patient with my issues. Try and get the, come on. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of myself now. Okay.
We there?
Yeah, all good. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay. Let me just minimize various bits and bobs so I can see what I'm doing. Yes, good afternoon. I'm Patrick Joyce, one of the project managers at Cambridgeshire County Council in the cycling team. And I've been asked to give you a whistle-stop tour of the Chisholm Trail, show you something of what's been involved in this flagship scheme at Cambridgeshire County Council, and to talk a little bit about reallocation of road space. Well, that's going to be difficult because I think really what this is about is allocation of cycle space rather than reallocation of road space, although there is a little bit of that involved. I apologise to folk that don't know Cambridge because perhaps some of this and the locations aren't going to make much sense, but hopefully you'll see some of the sort of general principles involved. I think I've got a bit of a Vanessa problem here because mine's locked up now. That's okay. Yeah, so okay. Today's presentation is, what is the Chisholm Trail? Something about the history, why we're doing it, what's involved, and a little bit about what we're doing just at the moment and what's to come. It isn't finished. We are on site, and things are progressing well, although it's a little bit behind schedule. So first of all, just to say something about what it is. here's a map of Cambridge, and just to say that the trail is essentially the blue bit in the middle, with the extension to the north and the south in purple, which is the guided busway, which has a dedicated cycle route alongside. So I suppose there's about, depending on which way you do the numbers, there's 3 kilometres of new route involved, but it's perhaps not, I mean, that's kind of new built cycle route, and there are routes that we're adapting with new bits of cycling infrastructure along the way, so it's a little bit confusing to say that it's only 3 kilometres of new route. In fact, it actually links Trumpington to the south with St Ives in the north, which is about 18 miles. So it's actually a very long strategic route. There's 2 major structures in it, and it follows the railway alignment. And I don't know whether you can see my cursor. Oh, my cursor. Anyway, it follows the railway alignment, which is basically north to south. Something about the history of it. This picture is Jim Chisholm himself. So it isn't, the name has got nothing to do with cattle droving in the United States. It's named after this chap who dreamt up the scheme perhaps 20 years ago, when he's identified an opportunity around the Mill Road railway bridge, which has some spare arches, and he felt that he could drive a traffic-free route for cycling and pedestrians between sort of north and south of Cambridge without interacting with heavy traffic. It's been widely promoted by the cycling campaign, Cam Cycle, and over the years it's sort of been shoehorned into county policy and found its way into the City Council's local plan and secured funding along the way, and just general widespread approval by the public and councillors. So it's actually a very popular scheme, and we've got Jim Chisholm to thank for it. But why are we doing it? There's an element of because we can. There's opportunities along the railway, the axis of the railway corridor. There's space, there's a bridge that we can use, spare arches. But the driver really is the fantastic amount of growth that's going on in Cambridge, generally Greater Cambridge, where you've got new developments of housing to the north, you've got large employers to the south, and it's about getting people to their places of work and education in a car-free way. And like I say, it's because we can. We don't want them in their cars. They already use a bicycle, and we want to encourage that some more. So who is it for? It's for everybody. This picture just shows a section which is actually how it is. It was and still is at the moment, and shows the sorts of users that will benefit other than cyclists. Clearly, this path is way too narrow, and the Chisholm Trail will be a much wider. It'll be high quality, essentially. It's about 3.5 meters wide rather than the 1.8 that you see here, which is clearly not enough. The idea is that it's for people of all ages, people doing whatever mode of transport they choose to go by, whether it's walking, skating, on their bikes, electric buggies, whatever. It's for everybody, and we've tried to follow the sort of sus-trans principle of the 10-year-old test, in that a child can actually do this unaccompanied in safety. The principles are the principles you see everywhere in any of the guidance. The fact that it should be direct, pleasant, it needs to link to where people want to go, and I think it does that completely. It obviously needs to be safe and perceived to be safe, so it's got to feel safe if we want people to use it. One of the beauties of the Chisholm Trail is that it actually links the green spaces in Cambridge, of which we have many, and it provides new access to other green spaces. So it's actually giving people new places to go, and new sort of ways of travelling around the city through green space where they currently don't have such access. Yeah, and it plays into all the usual things of aiding public health and congestion, air quality, all the things that the boxes we have to tick with central government, and it does it in spades. So I've showed you this diagram. If you just, where's my cursor? Yeah, up to the north, we've got a new railway station. For those that don't know Cambridge, it links into this. At the north, there's a large amount of new business and housing development up here to the north. Our guided busway here that heads off to St Ives in that westerly direction is shown in purple. This here is the River Cam through Cambridge, and there's a new bridge going in here. We'll talk about that in a little while. So the blue that you see is stuff that we're actually constructing that is new. And I've labelled it the Chisholm Trail there. Marshalls is another huge employer. Marshalls Airport is an aerospace company. Cambridge Station and Addenbrooke's Hospital down here at the south, again, in the biomedical campus. Again, massive employers. So it links all these employers and housing developments in a way that means they don't have to interact with traffic, which currently cyclists do have to do. So I'm showing this map now in slightly greater detail. Here's the railway here through the middle, river here. The bits that we're building currently is in red, and I've called that phase 1. The bit that is blue is some of it's on highway, quite a lot of it's on highway. So that has its own advantages. Phase 1 is mostly off-road. So this here is through meadowland, and this here is again a sort of secluded green space and a common here where there's a path through it. Like I say, this is largely through areas of housing and on highway. So this bit required planning consent, and this bit very largely doesn't, because it's on highway or the subject of planning applications by Network Rail, and I'll come on to that in a little bit too. So obviously with a scheme like this, you know, what's involved? Clearly a lot of civil engineering. We've got 2 major structures, which I'm going to show you in a bit. Consultation is involved. I think at the last count there were 16 rounds of consultation that we did, which ranged from exhibitions to local liaison fora that we used to run, where we brought interested parties in to give us a hard time through the planning stage, and so they felt that they were involved and had a sense of ownership. We had to go through planning consent, as you might expect. Because we're going through a common, we had to have Secretary of State approval with Commons consent, and that brings its own challenges. Environment Agency consent, because it's in a floodplain. We crossed the river, so you need a bridge navigation order. Parts of it had to be CPO'd. I have to say not so very much, but we did have to CPO some land to enable the route. And we're adjacent to the railway or within the railway in a lot of it. So there's a whole raft of procedures you have to go through with Network Rail to be able to construct something on their land. I include the train operating companies in that. 15 landowners we had to make deals with to kind of get the route. So I said that I'd talk to you about reallocation of road space, because there is some. Again, apologies to people that don't know Cambridge. This is Coldham's Lane, which is a major sort of distributive road, if you like, within the city. And this is Cromwell Road, where the Chisholm Trail will go. This here, this side, is Coldham's Common. And our route comes following my cursor to this point, and we cross Coldham's Lane and go down Cromwell Road here. And why is this to do with reallocation of road space? Well, at the moment, this is a very clunky and difficult junction for cyclists and pedestrians to navigate, with a sort of 3-stage crossing for some movements, with push button crossings. And we've changed this to a single stage crossing by taking out, whoops, we'll go back, by taking out an island here, which used to allow a U-turn for vehicles. So we've taken that away, so they can't make that maneuver anymore, and they have to use a roundabout a little bit further down the road. So we've taken away from motor vehicles and given back to pedestrians and cyclists. And that's involved a fairly radical, if you know the setup, rearrangement of what goes on at this particular junction. It's not been built yet. It's one of the next things to do in part of our second phase. Here, a little bit further down, this is a residential street, but it used to serve a very large builders merchants, which is now being redeveloped for housing, even as we speak. There are cranes on the horizon that I can see when I look out of my window. And so when it was a business, in business as a builder's merchant, this road had a lot of heavy goods vehicles going through it. Now it's being redeveloped for housing. Now we have the opportunity to reallocate the road space in this road, and we'll be narrowing down the carriageway by moving out the curb line and building a 3.5 metre wide path along this axis here. So all this is being taken out, and the new curb line will be here, because it doesn't have to be anything like as wide as it currently is. I spoke a little bit earlier about Network Rail. We use the railway axis. Well, this is how it used to look. If you stand on Mill Road Bridge in Cambridge and look northwards, this is how it used to look, I say. But here, that you can see this track. This is what we're going to use. This will be the footprint that we use for the Chisholm Trail heading north and south. Currently, this is being, again, redeveloped, if you like, by Network Rail for rail infrastructure. They're building a new train wash along here. And when they planned this, they included the Chisholm Trail in their plans to use this particular alignment along here. This doesn't look like very much, but this is actually full of railway signalling equipment, and I think it cost them £2 million, I think, to move that porter cabin. So they've been very good about accommodating our scheme. So today, that same view looks like this. You see the cranes on the horizon where they're building out the Bridgeon housing development. That's the City Council and Hills are in there doing that. The Chisholm Trail goes down here, and this is going to be a new train wash in this area. On the left of the screen, you can see another crane there. That is the former City Council depot, the so-called ironworks site. So it's all go there at the moment. And if we look the opposite direction, you can see a similar sort of thing. We're standing on a bridge with a spare arch where this track goes through. And this will be the alignment of the Chisholm Trail. Further up here, where I'm circling with my cursor, there's currently being constructed stabling for all the new GTR Thameslink trains, which spend the night there, if you like. It's the stabling for all the new trains. So this has all been a massive construction site for the last year or more, with new track being laid, and again with the Chisholm Trail being reserved along here, which we will have to come back when they're finished and surface it and construct what we need to do. Like I say, this is what it looks like today. A lot of the rail infrastructure has already gone in at this point. Here's where the trail is preserved. And if you look at Mill Road Bridge from the south, you can't actually see this for most people because I'm standing on railway land taking the photograph. This is one of the reserved arches, and this very kindly our chums at Network Rail have built this for us, and so they've accommodated the trail in their works whereas the trains, the new trains, that the track that they're laying will go through here. So there'll be a fence down here separating the railway infrastructure from the cycling infrastructure on this side. Okay, so this is the other side of the railway, the western side. Currently, this is the driver's car park. The trail will come through here, between the cars as it stands, and it will punch through somewhere here. We believe this is yet to be established with Network Rail and the developer into this area here, which is another builder's merchants, which is being redeveloped for housing, and in their plans they too have accommodated the trail. It's not purely because they want to help us, it's because it's in the local plan that they have to, and it is reserved through the planning process. And this is the ironworks site, and I'm just showing you here, this is where the trail comes through. There's a spare arch in the foreground where you can't actually see it, but the ironworks site accommodates the trail as well. So, like I say, there's a lot going on in this scheme. What's been involved in the process? Well, I mean, it's nearly killed me actually trying to get this thing to happen. We had 37 pre-commencement planning conditions. There's 2 planning applications, one for the bridge and one for the trail. And of all and they both had a huge number of planning conditions, and between them, 37 of those conditions are pre-commencement. We're working in the green belt, and that again, as you can imagine, brings its own challenges, trying to get development in the green belt. We managed to do that. Our problems have been compounded by the fact that we're on city wildlife sites, county wildlife sites. Virtually every life form known to man is to be found along the route in some of these areas, and we've had huge delays due to lizards and voles in particular, which has stopped us working at various times of year, and has delayed the project and cost us a lot of money. Flood mitigation. We're building a bridge, and the ramp sits within the floodplain, and because every cubic meter of stuff you bring in to make your ramp means a cubic meter of water that might end up in somebody's front room, we've had to consider how we accommodate that within the scheme as well. So there's very substantial flood mitigation works that are ongoing or will be done in the very near future when we get to that point. We've got contamination of all kinds, including asbestos. There's archaeology involved because we're right next to the oldest building in Cambridge, the Leper Chapel, which is listed. So we mustn't, with our works, in any way damage that or dig up any of the bodies that may be located in the graveyard there. There's a whole list of things that we've had to consider, not least the navigation and the fact that rowing events have to continue. We've had homeless people in an encampment, drugs, fly tip waste, human waste. We've found 3 corpses in the course of our construction, and there's been 1 murder. So it's been quite an eventful time. Newmarket Road is where we're putting an underpass, just to show you this. On the screen where the 6 is the oldest building in Cambridge, and the red lines show where the Chisholm Trail comes through with an underpass beneath Mill Road. This is what it looked like before we started work. You can see the Leper Chapel there. This area is a wildlife site and was stuffed with lizards. So that in itself put a huge brake on our being able to work at certain times of year and to have to clear ground and mitigate for the loss of habitat. We're building a huge bridge. This is some of the stats for the bridge. It's 44 meters long, steel, Cambridge blue. Anyone who lives in Cambridge can go and have a look at it now. It's 4.5 meters wide at its narrowest point, at the abutments. And it was designed, a concept design from Knight Architect and made by some very clever people in Yorkshire. the SH structures. There it is, being constructed some time ago now in Sherburn and Elmet by SH. And as you can imagine, this is where the bridge is going, that we had to do some quite substantial groundworks before the bridge got put in. Here, these sheet piles support the riverbank. Some of those are 18 meters long because the ground is probably is actually quite similar to porridge in terms of strength. And there is the bridge actually being lifted in. So that's what it looks like. As you can imagine, it weighs 130 tons, so you need some fairly chunky cables to be able to lift it. And this was happening just a little over a week ago now. This is it being lifted by what is the largest mobile crane in UK. It's a 1,200 ton crane. It sits on its own piled foundation there, despite being a mobile crane. And there it is, installed in situ, and that's been there now for a little over a week. Broadly, it's been well received by the public. So everyone's itching to use it. That's all I've got to say for now. And get the chance, if you want, to ask me any questions a bit later on.
Hi. Just bear with me while I sorry, uncover the right button. There we go. No. Can somebody just confirm they can see my slide full screen and not on presenter view?
Yep, all good. Thanks, Dominic.
Yep, great, thanks. Hi, yeah, so I'm Dom Smith. I manage Transport for Greater Manchester's cycling and walking infrastructure delivery team. Yeah, as colleagues said before, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Cyclops Junction, which we've just finished our first iteration of on site. But also going to take you through a little bit more of the kind of context of the early development and implementation of our B network, because the Cyclops is a key thing which is going to enable us to deliver that wider network, and hopefully that's perhaps brings this a bit of a wider applicability to people's schemes elsewhere. So just in terms of context, so when Chris Boardman was appointed about 3 years ago now by Andy Burnham as our first cycling and walking commissioner, he developed his first thing he did was publish his Made to Move vision, which was 15 steps to transform how we get around Greater Manchester. And his kind of central message in that was that riding a bicycle or crossing a street shouldn't require bravery. It should be something that's part of everyday life. And the first of those 15 steps was to create a plan for a network. So we started going about doing this sort of 2.5 years ago with a series of gosh, they look so 2019 now, don't they? Imagine getting that close to people these days. But yeah, basically sessions around big blank maps like this with members of the community, cycle and walking campaigners, local residents, local councillors, and good old local government officers as well, around blank maps like this one. And the purpose of these sessions was to build a network from scratch, build the network that we wanted to see in the future. So first of all, we gave everybody a red pen and we said, right, draw on all the big horrible roads and the railway lines and the rivers and the things that are very difficult to get across, or in the case of busy roads, difficult to ride along if you're on a bike. And yeah, use the red pen to effectively divide the area in question. This is Rochdale, which is one of the 10 districts in Greater Manchester. You can see that divides the area up into a series of cells. which are bounded by things that are difficult to cross if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist. And then we said, can you then take a blue pen and draw on some dots where existing decent crossing points of those forms of severance exist? So those might be a decent cycling and walking crossing of a road. There might be a bridge in the case of a river or a railway. It might be an underpass. Where can you currently get across them? And you can see there that the kind of shading in the background then gives you an idea of the level of openness of each of those cells. The red ones generally are the ones that are completely closed off, and the people living in those cells are kind of landlocked within those cells, through to the green ones, which are kind of open on all sides. And then we said, okay, so where would you put new crossing points? And these are the green dots. We give them a green pen to start to open up those cells to walking and cycling. New crossing points to make connections between those cells. And it then becomes, as you can see, a kind of the world's biggest join the dots puzzle, really. And you then, back in the office later, we basically join the dots with a yellow pen in this case, basically to find the shortest route between the crossing points mainly on existing quiet streets, such that you can make best use of those existing quiet streets linking to the new crossing points to start to develop a network. And then we replicated that across the whole of Greater Manchester with similar sessions in each of the boroughs, and replicated that process across the whole of Greater Manchester, and ultimately produced that document, which we published in the summer of 2018. And then we had a big public consultation, mainly online. We also held a few events as well, but the key thing was it was an online portal through which we gathered over 4,000 georeferenced online responses to the network. Each one of those little blobs there is a response, which we then committed hundreds and hundreds of hours of officer time to analysing and deciding what they meant in terms of the network. But those comments were basically either advising us of particular safety issues on existing routes, or saying, actually, we think this B network route should go this way instead of that sort of thing. And we then pulled all that together and then issued a second version of the B network, taking all that into account in the summer of 2019. And there's some stats there of how big it is, which I won't go into now because I know we're a little short of time. And I quite like this quote from our Commissioner, Chris Boardman, that at the stage where we were putting this together, it was about what's possible, not about what's needed. We were very clear that the needed bit was our job later. What we wanted to get out of this was, the possible bit was our job later. What we wanted to get out of this was what was needed in terms of a network to get people walking and cycling. And the possible bit would come later. And then in terms of delivery and what it's going to look like on the ground, we've earmarked three main types of infrastructure. And the majority of the network will be on existing quiet streets, or indeed traffic-free routes, generally less than 4,000 vehicles a day, and joining up the crossing points, which I showed you on the map previously. A number of busy B-ways will also be in there, which is where a road has greater than 4,000 vehicles a day, and therefore to provide high quality cycling level of service, you'll need protected infrastructure, as you can see in that picture there in the middle. And then the third type of infrastructure is around active neighbourhoods, low traffic neighbourhoods, perhaps, to give them another name. So I'll tell you a little bit about each of those now, and I'll focus perhaps a little more on the busy B-ways, just because of the focus on road space reallocation of this session. So on quiet streets, the concept here really is that the majority of streets in Greater Manchester look something like this. They're quiet streets. They've got relatively little traffic on. and in theory at least, they represent a reasonably approachable cycling and walking environment. There might be issues like you can see vehicles parked on footways there, lack of pedestrian crossing infrastructure, etc. But on the face of it, there oughtn't to be a great deal to do to get them to work. So the question is, well, why don't they work at the moment? And I quite like this as an illustration of that, which you'll see. This is a major road in Greater Manchester, and you can see the representation of this location on our current cycling and walking map in the bottom right of the screen. And you can see that the yellow indicates the cycle route, and it looks, oh yeah, there's a nice crossing point of the busy road. It looks all nice and navigable. When you actually come to look at it on the ground, it looks like this. And I suppose you say, well, where's the cycle route? And the answer to that is, well, the cycle route is here. It comes up this quiet street. It turns a nice 90-degree bend onto this narrow shared use footway with a road sign in the middle, and then you've got another 90-degree onto a narrow toucan crossing and another 90-degree, and there's a bin in the way. And then, yes, if you've made it this far, then you pop out from behind this building to be run over by this Volvo that's about to run you over here with limited visibility. So it doesn't work. It doesn't communicate cycle route. So we've had to come up with much more innovative ways of making that sort of route work. And these are a couple of illustrations. On the left is one we've built already, kind of a new sort of innovative way of getting across these roads. And the one on the right is an example that caught my eye that came in recently to our design review board. I suppose the most important caveat on this type of crossing is it often involves closing roads to motor vehicles, or making roads one way to motor vehicles, or various other innovative and sometimes slightly difficult pills to swallow. But we believe it's worth it to make the facilities work for walking and particularly cycling. On then busier roads, so we've done quite a bit of this already. A number of people will have seen our Wilmslow Road cycleway, which is this image is from. But the thing that's missing on routes like that is often junctions. That's an example of a big nasty junction. It's actually in London, that one. I won't go into everything that's wrong with it from a walking and cycling perspective now, but you can see there's plenty. And until recently, the kind of most exciting thing we had in terms of walking and cycling facilities at major junctions was this little thing here, a kind of advanced green for cyclists, which yeah, we were getting excited about a few years ago, but really doesn't do a great deal, and certainly doesn't do anything unless you actually arrive when the lights are on red. And we've now developed this, and we've now built our first Cyclops, which delivers yeah, a full priority stage for cycling and pedestrians on all arms, and enables all movements to be made without conflict, either between cyclists and pedestrians or between cyclists and pedestrians and motor vehicles. And we believe it's quite a game changer in terms of enabling us to deliver those busy bee routes on the busier roads. There's a couple of before and after pictures. You can see it's a fairly standard four-arm junction before the scheme went in, and this is roughly similar angle afterwards. And you can see, yeah, so there's the circulatory carriageway for cyclists around the outside. The pedestrians go in the middle. Key difference here to the Dutch way of doing things. It is basically the Dutch way of doing things. Generally speaking, the Dutch place them the other way around, so the bikes are on the inside and the pedestrians on the outside. The key advantage to that is that it enables the cyclists and the cycle and the pedestrian stage to run in parallel, because the bikes don't come into conflict with the green men, because the cycle, you can deal with the cycle pedestrian conflict outside of the signalled area of the junction, because the pedestrians are all within the cyclists. Yes, for more geekery, there's a link there to a paper we've published on it. I'll skip through active neighbourhoods reasonably quickly because I know we're out of time, but this is the glue that binds it all together. Modal filters like this one and that one are absolutely key. That one's in Greater Manchester, that one's not, because it's fancy and expensive and we don't have as much money as they do in Waltham Forest. That's in Greater Manchester, actually. That's in Stockport. That was our first parklet. But yeah, filtering neighbourhoods to make them work, make those local streets better for walking and cycling and playing in the street, etc. Some facts and figures as to what we've done so far in terms of delivery. We think it's going to take quite a long time, but we have delivered 87 kilometres of protected bike routes already, and we've established a £160 million Mayor's Challenge Fund to kick off the delivery of it, of the B network, which we think will take 10 to 15 years overall, and perhaps 1.5 billion overall. We did that by allocating 65% of our Transforming Cities Fund allocation to cycling and walking. We've got 82 schemes in a pipeline, of which 15 have now got full approval. And interestingly, we've now got about 30 sites in the pipeline for Cyclops sites, and 19 million secured through EATF as of the announcement last week, which is enabling us to do substantial sections of the sort of accelerate delivery on substantial sections of the network using temporary or semi-permanent infrastructure like that you can see here. I suspect I'm probably out of time, so I'll pretty much finish there. I suppose just to go back to that Chris Boardman quote and slightly modify it. Yeah, we now know what's needed, and the challenge now is to make it possible. And I think the Cyclops is a key tool in enabling that. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Dom. Thanks to Vanessa and Patrick earlier on as well for your presentations. Obviously, it's brilliant to see the variety of solutions that are available and coming to fruition at the moment, from floating bus stops to parallel crossings to full major junction treatments. I won't say too much at this point in summary, because it'd be nice to get a couple of questions in, although we are overrunning a bit. But I thought, first of all, there are a few in. If you'd like to send another one, then we might be able to squeeze it in. But the first one was specifically for Vanessa. In terms of, it's a budget question. Eric Manners is asking, was it really 2.3 million? And would you have any advice for how to help reduce that figure for future projects or similar ones?
Yes. I think one of the issues was that we came out initially with a figure of 800,000 before we understood the full scope of the scheme. And once we'd worked on the scheme for a number of years, it became obvious that that budget would not be sufficient. It did then sort of up to about 1.4. That was at the detailed design stage. Once we knew a bit more from surveys and C2s and C3s and so on. But I think it came down to an issue with risk management, not keeping tabs on that early enough. Also, there's such pressure on the network that, once you have your allocation road space wise, you've got to stick with it. And that was, in our case, September 2019. So we did go into that construction period not having the C4s and not having as much knowledge of what we'll be facing when we dug the road up as we would ideally have liked. And it was the extent of the utility works and the delays that meant for the program, the budget, which I mentioned, and COVID, which boosted the cost significantly. So yeah, we've learned lessons, and we're actually implementing those lessons at the moment. I think probably we would have had to go back to get approval for that increased budget, but we just thought we've got to build this thing, and and just get on with it. I think there is a difficulty with budgets and cycling projects and the perception that cycling infrastructure should be delivered for peanuts, whereas, you know, normal road construction can be billions and billions of pounds because it's for the motor vehicle. And I think if we're delivering ambitious infrastructure, we need proper budgets to go with it. So, you know, a mixture there, but certainly a lesson learned on the risk management side, but also maybe finger in the air at the beginning of a project doesn't actually help you further down the line if you're not fully aware of the scope of the project. I hope that answers it to some extent.
Thank you. Graham, do you want to take a pick of the questions?
Yeah, sorry, I nearly did the classic thing of trying to talk on mute there. I think there's a question on for Patrick, actually, just on the sorry, I'm trying to find it now. We've had a few more in, which has moved them. He was talking about, I think, the sort of the options for wall fencing and landscaping where the route is in proximity to the railway, whether that be palisade fencing and whether either Network Rail would be undertaking the maintenance for that or be responsible for it, or whether it would be the Highway Authority. That was a question from James Cutting. I don't know if is Patrick with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, hi Patrick. Sorry.
This is about railway fencing. Yeah.
I think where the track was in proximity to the railway, it was how that would be sort of fence controlled and who's responsible.
Yeah, the railway are very particular about what kind of fencing goes on next to the railway, and they insist on palisade fencing essentially. And so if you want to have a deal with the railway, you go with what they want. Otherwise, they're not going to even talk to you. So that will become the responsibility of the railway. But we're going to have to provide it, and it's provided to their specification. The fencing that we put up can be whatever we like, you know, so long as that fits with the planning. So our fencing looks nice, theirs looks horrible. End of.
That's very succinct. Yeah, Ian, did you want to grab another one?
Yeah, there was one from Thomas O'Kane, a question for all. Thomas has noted in Holland that bikes can be taken onto public transport, making the transition between active travel and public transport seamless. Are we likely to see anything similar in the UK, or will we or will we be likely to have just secure cycle spaces in train stations?
Happy to come in on that if. I think we clearly do already see some of that in the UK, don't we? Certainly not perhaps in terms of the capacity that you see in the Netherlands, etc., where you'll find entire carriages dedicated to cycle carriage or whatever. I suppose I tend to get less excited about that as I do about the importance of proper integration at the stations and nodes, simply because of sheer numbers. I don't think it's ever realistic to be encouraging thousands of people to be kind of dual mode commuting, including taking a bike on actually on the public transport. I think it is far more important in terms to make sure that we've got really high quality, high accessibility, large numbers of bikes, bike stands, bike cycle parking infrastructure, etc., in the right locations at the stations and stops, nodes, whatever you want to call them, that they're needed at, and that's always going to be a bigger player in the cycle rail market than actual provision of enabling bikes to be carried on busy commuter rail and light rail services, I'd have said, but it clearly has a part to play.
I think what you're finding is people keep a bike at either end. So they'll store a bike at the far end of their journey and dump one at the beginning. So that's what we find in Cambridge.
Yeah.
Graham, do you want to come in?
In terms of another question?
Yeah, should we go up to 1:45 since we were a bit...
Yeah, might as well. Right. There was a question really for all speakers, and it's talking about, in light of the current backlash to LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, and other cycling infrastructure schemes, do you have any advice on how local communities can be brought on board at an early stage to help counter negative media coverage and or political involvement further down the line? That was from Gavin Rutter.
I think it's very...
Yeah, sorry, Vanessa.
No, right. I think given the nature of the funding, which was, had such tight deadlines, that meant it was really very difficult to do any sort of pre-consultation before a lot of the low traffic neighbourhood modal filters were put in. It's interesting how once schemes are in, I think they are the sort of best form of consultation that you can carry out, because so many people actually respond in a way that perhaps they weren't expecting, and they actually do like and appreciate what it means for their neighbourhood. I'm not sure that countering negative press is something that we who deliver schemes will ever have any control over, because the nature of the media is that they wish to court controversy, and if it can be done at our expense, all the better. But I think if you've taken local residents and businesses on a journey before and you've done it well, I think that can stand you in better stead when it comes to the rolling out of perhaps more controversial schemes in which, with ETROs, the consultation is done once the scheme is in place. But I think certainly in Cambridge, it's a very time-consuming part of our job is engaging with stakeholders and winning them around, because Cambridge is full of people with high level of education and a lot of opinions, well-informed opinions.
Can I add to that? I think I'd say the biggest transition I've seen in recent years has perhaps been from to a more community-led approach to design. So I think in years gone by, we've perhaps designed it in the office, we've put it out to consultation, to, in inverted commas, consultation to say, this is what we're going to build, what do you think? And then we've either built it if people have said they liked it, or binned it if they said they didn't. And a switch much more, and I think this is particularly possible through low traffic neighbourhoods, where you've got a kind of concept of removing through traffic and filter points, etc. But actually, you can go to the community through online engagement tools or whatever, or heaven forbid, even public meetings, once we're allowed to do that again, to say what's wrong with your street, how can we fix that, and getting that kind of community-led scheme, which then has a kind of, you said we did element to it when you then come to build it.
Okay, I think that takes us up to 1:45. So what I should say is that for those who have asked questions, we've got them all recorded and logged using this system. And for other ones like this, we can do some very short and sharp answers to those. I think there's about 2 or 3 sort of outstanding questions, and thank you for everyone for providing those. Ian, shall I hand over to you just to quickly wrap up?
Sure, yeah. Just say thanks everyone who's been involved. There There is a feedback survey that will pop up when you do leave the webinar, so please send through your answers to that. Otherwise, just remains to thank everyone involved today, all our speakers, the RTPI team, Graham for assisting with organising Q&A, and of course to the audience. Thanks for attending and enjoy the rest of your Monday afternoon.
Thanks.